Hello and welcome. This is the Industry Transparency Podcast, where we are exploring what's happening across the natural products, supplement, and ingredient industries. My name is Steve Imgrund. I'm the Communications and Marketing Director here at ITC. And today we're diving into a term, a topic that is gaining a lot of traction, as well as maybe causing a little bit of confusion, and that would be postbiotics. The term postbiotic seems to be everywhere. Maybe that's just me being in the industry, but even with that interest, the definition, applications are still misunderstood, both from the consumers as well as the industry to a degree. So today we are going to be diving deep into what postbiotics actually are, how the science and terminology are evolving, and where the category might be headed next. From a consumer data perspective, ITC has also completed a global supplement data report on postbiotic users. And what we're seeing is that postbiotics really are no longer niche. They do have awareness. They are being used for everything from digestion to immune health, skin support. But again, there's definitely a gap in understanding. And to help us untangle this web, I am joined today by Aleksic, an integrative pharmacist, researcher, and scientific communicator. Anna brings years of experience in clinical research, medical writing, including leading editorial work for one of the larger health platforms online. And her passion lies in bridging evidence-based science with holistic health. And she's been deeply immersed in the biotic space, which of course we'll be focusing on today. And so today we are going to be pulling back the curtain to demystify what postbiotics actually are, what they're not, and why now is perhaps a time for more clarity across science, as well as marketing. But before we dive in, Anna, I'd love for you to briefly introduce yourself, maybe in your own words, and share what first drew you to the biotics, postbiotic space.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Steve. Yes, so I'm thrilled to be here and to be demystifying postbiotics with you. So I've been a science communicator and content strategist for over 10 years, and more broadly in the health, wellness, and dietary supplement space. But really over the past 5 years, a lot of my focus has been on biotics broadly and on creating content and materials around biotics and the human microbiome. And this is what drew me to postbiotics, because I've known about postbiotics for a long while, but it was only recently that I decided to dive into this topic in more detail. And that's how I discovered this whole really entangled web that you talk about as well. And how I got into it really was through writing, and it was through creating content about specific probiotic benefits, actually, where I would come across different clinical studies or scientific reviews using different terminology. So some would still be using, and this is even recent studies, I would come across scientific studies that would use the term, for example, parabiotics or paraprobiotics. And then I started to look into this in more detail and realized how much inconsistency there is. So even within the scientific community, and then as I started interacting with some people in the industry more, I realized that there's also some confusion and lack of clarity in the industry as well. And what I started with was a really simple question, because I do both B2B and B2C content, and I really like to think about and center the consumer. And so I asked myself, if the industry doesn't seem clear on this concept of postbiotics, then what can the consumer make of it? How does the consumer see postbiotics and, the ways that these products may apply to their health? That's really what drew me to the topic initially.
Love it. Love it. So kind of like, let's set the groundwork and
Yeah.
maybe get everyone on the same page. We do have an industry audience that's very familiar with the biotic space, but For people that may not be familiar with probiotics, what are prebiotics? And of course, we're talking about postbiotics. Sounds like just another biotic ingredient. But for those just hearing about postbiotics, how would you define what they are? How do they differ from pre and pro?
Okay, so this is, perhaps a simple question, but I would actually like to start not with my own stance, but I would like to start by referencing the current ISAP definition. So the definition from the International Scientific Association for Probiotics and Prebiotics, and then go into how I would describe it, just so we have sort of the foundation there from the beginning of our conversation. So based on the ISAP definition from 2021, postbiotics are a preparation of inanimate microorganisms and or their components that confers a health benefit on the host. Now, what's certain here, and what's 100% certain, is that postbiotics are not living organisms. Now, if we were to put this in the simplest terms, so what the consumer may understand, for example, we could say that postbiotics are dead microbes or their parts that have health benefits. And they may contain helpful products that these microbes left behind, which can help your gut or overall health if we're talking to the consumer. Now, even this is not perfect paraphrasing, right? Because specific products can have specific health benefits. And we wouldn't be talking about overall health then. But if I were to put this definition perhaps in simple terms for the industry and for health professionals, I would say that postbiotics are preparations of inanimate microbes and or their components. So killed bacteria, cell wall fragments, surface proteins, membrane pieces, and structures that the immune system and gut lining may recognize. And microbial metabolites like short-chain fatty acids, organic acids, and similar, they can be part of a postbiotic preparation. But at least based on the ISAP definition, metabolites alone, purified metabolites, do not qualify. And we will get into this more next, but this is where a lot of the confusion comes from. I would also want to highlight that basically whole or components of inactivated microbes need to be present, with or without metabolic end products. And what's really important, and I think this is clear, is that the health benefits of a postbiotic product must be demonstrated in the target population. This is sort of an initial breakdown that I could give for someone maybe who is not sure about postbiotics. Is there anything that you would like to comment on or?
Yeah. So, I mean, we were talking about the ISAP definition, referencing inanimate microorganisms and their components. What would you say is working with that definition for the most part? And maybe we could go into your perspectives on what could be up for interpretation.
Right. So I think this definition is, for the most part, working well. Now, many wouldn't agree. There are definitely people who think that it is too limiting because it doesn't include microbial metabolites that are purified. And then others would say that this is actually beneficial and that making the category too broad and too vague could really present risks, various risks, so that, we have different things in there. We're not certain about how they can be specified and quantified. And then we're also not certain about how claims can be made when we have such a broad category, so that we could have various things included sort of like as a big umbrella, and that brands or companies may start making claims just because their product falls under a postbiotic category. So there are various things to discuss here. It's really like the definition seems simple and straightforward, but we could even break it down word by word and see, why certain words were chosen, specific words like inanimate or specific words like preparation as opposed to product or formulation. So the ISAB has sort of a description of these, and I have my perspectives, other people in the industry as well. There's really a lot to discuss, but basically what I would say is that in the end, we need to think about how we're using words. And I'm really passionate about this as a science communicator because I think words are important and words shape our reality, in the broader sense. And when we talk about the industry, the way we use these words shape how we see these products and how the consumers see these products and what meaning they have. So we need to be all on the same page. Basically, I think that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Words, I mean, 100%, they are very important, and choosing the right words at the right time can change, the understanding of something. I wanted to zoom in on something that you mentioned, the quantification component to this conversation. From what I've seen, there is no uniform quantification method. Some seem to be using inactive CFU, units for measuring. Some maybe are using milligram amounts. What are the challenges, the risks in not having a uniform way of measuring these?
Well, the question is whether we can even expect to have a uniform way to measure postbiotics, because they can be such different preparations. And so based on, recent industry consensus and some of the scientific reviews and studies that have been published around this, the current stance is that we can't expect to have a unified quantification framework for the whole postbiotics category, even if it were to, even as it does, exclude metabolites. And that we would need to look at specific different preparations and then different ways to quantify them. So for example, if we're talking about a whole inactivated cells, if we're talking about cellular components, or if we're talking about unpurified microbial cells that are inactivated. Basically, so I have some information here in references. For example, a recent study that was published by Venderola and colleagues in 2025 specifies and proposes specific ways that these preparations can be quantified. For one, if they're using intact cells. So this is where we have, things like flow cytometry and PCR. Then, depending if it's one species or several species, then we have different quantification methods for fragmented cells. And then, if we have things like filamentous fungi and stuff, then that's a whole other discussion of ways that they can be quantified. And this discussion about quantification is not important only when we talk about how the preparation is specified, from when it's formulated, but it's also important when we talk about stability. Because in order to demonstrate the stability of a postbiotic preparation and things like longer shelf life, that is considered to be one of the main advantages of postbiotics, companies should also be able to show that they can quantify the active ingredients or parts of the formulation. And this is something that we're yet to expect. Like we don't see yet regulations that are specific around this, but we may expect it in the future. And so companies should be able to handle that. And there are some examples in the industry where postbiotic products, the bioactives were specified, like cell outer membrane surface proteins, like in the example of a second generation Akkermansia supplement. So for example, they specified their bioactives and said that this is how they would measure the activity of the product and can also demonstrate shelf life. So these are discussions that we need to be having, but there are still a lot of unknowns, and we need to consider, this on a product specific basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
for that breakdown. Maybe opens more questions that it
It
does
opens more
give
questions,
answers. Mhm.
absolutely. And even that tenet of stability, which is plausible, everyone mentions it, but it's more supposed than it's proven based on this quantification dilemma that exists. And, various authorities around the world are trying to find ways to deal with this. And there was some recent research published about how the Chinese authorities handled this and tried to specify ways to quantify these postbiotic ingredients. So there are initiatives that are being taken to bring clarity to the issue.
Yeah. Well, maybe this would be a good opportunity to maybe go into perhaps a contentious topic, but it's kind of a mental hurdle for some people hearing the idea of dead inactivated microbes that could, lead to a health benefit, which does seem to fly in the face of the probiotic mantra, the idea that microbes need to be alive to work. So,
Mm-hmm.
how do you see the industry reconciling this difference? How do you think about it? Probiotics being alive, postbiotics being inactivated, from a messaging standpoint, scientific standpoint.
Yes, this is such an interesting question. And, initially the idea does seem opposing in a way. So when does it seem opposing to say, okay, we are claiming for probiotics that products need to contain a certain CFU count, and that, products should have it by the end of the shelf life, and that these probiotics should survive in the gastrointestinal tract as well. So this is a tenet, right? And then someone may ask, well, if that's not the case, and if a probiotic supplement loses its CFU count, is it a postbiotic? Or, if it doesn't survive in the gastrointestinal tract, we would think that it's not an efficient probiotic, but is it actually a postbiotic? And this is, creating confusion, but it's a valid question. Like I've seen even, and the messaging around this makes it even more confusing. For example, I recently found some white paper that was around probiotics used in baking. And they were claiming that since certain probiotics won't survive the baking process, which uses very high temperatures, well, then that the bread will still be postbiotic because these microbes were simply killed in the process. Or I even saw health articles claiming that you can eat certain postbiotic foods because when you, expose fermented foods to treatment, then you have a postbiotic. So this is not the case, but it is what is sort of being communicated in a way. And one way to clarify this is to understand that a postbiotic needs to be deliberately inactivated. And, there are different treatments to do this, but that process needs to be standardized and deliberate. And we're also seeing with different products that the way that microbes can be treated, for example, heat treated, will have different effects on their functionality. So for example, if you have a certain Akkermansia strain and you subject it to typical autoclave conditions, like very high temperatures, 120 degrees for a short amount of time, what researchers found is that it's usually not effective, so it won't have specific health benefits. If it's pasteurized, so much lower temperatures are used for a bit longer, depending on the pasteurization procedure, then a lot of the health benefits are retained. So this is where we see one example where we see this is a whole cell sort of postbiotic preparation, that the way these microbes are treated and what the endpoint is very important. And the same applies to products that have microbial components. So we are going to understand, why postbiotics can have certain health benefits and value as a category if we stop treating them sort of just as this general mass of dead microbes and get more specific and start to understand that procedures need to be standardized as do products, and that these products need to have clinical data supporting specific health outcomes. And then this is where we can talk about mechanisms. And then when we talk about mechanisms and how postbiotics may act, and this is a big discussion, and there are various stances around this and proposed mechanisms, but these mechanisms perhaps may have a unifying principle. And then we can really start to see postbiotics as a functional category of products that have specific health benefits and mechanisms of action and, bioactives or components that have health benefits. But even what's really interesting when you ask this, I was looking into sort of the history of postbiotics, and it's interesting that I came across data that in the early 20th century, there was a French scientist that was back in 1907 that was actually doing research in France, and his name was Dr. Pierre Boucard, and he discovered the therapeutic potential of heat-treated fecal lactobacillus in relieving digestive disease symptoms. So this was 1907. And basically, he isolated Lactobacillus acidophilus from human stool. He observed its antidiarrheal effects, and he later established a company that developed a commercial heat-treated product that's called Lactiol. It's still available in France. And this was way before we were even using the term probiotics, which was coined in the 50s, and before a lot of the probiotic research and the whole revolution around that started occurring in science in the 60s and 70s, and now what we're seeing, of course, in modern research. So who would say, that before we were even talking about probiotics and the human microbiome, there was this French scientist who was making postbiotics without even thinking to call them such. So, the history is there, and we have then more studies starting from the 90s that were exploring postbiotics. So the concept is new, but it's not that new. It's just a question of how we're going to frame it now with taking into account modern scientific research and methods.
Yeah. So, I would maybe expect that we are going to see a lot more differentiation in the research that is specific to the type of postbiotic. How do you quantify that? The deliberate inactivation methods being a very crucial piece of the storytelling. I was just kind of thinking while you were going through that explanation about the differences between what we're describing with postbiotics and the inactivation methods being very important, and how we are discussing various herbal extracts and various different methods to extract, different components from herbals. Yes. Do you see kind of a same
absolutely growth? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I was thinking the same actually in preparation for a conversation. I was thinking absolutely the same thing. Mm-hmm. And then when we look at herbal extracts, for example, we have standardized herbal extracts, we have whole herb extracts, we have combined herbal formulas, we have all of this, and it's very important when we talk about the whole category and then the clinical data that comes from it. But what's different perhaps is that within the herbal category, usually or sometimes we have herbs that have also a long history of use, which can sometimes be helpful. And sometimes we have new, actives and stuff like that need to be explored. But with postbiotics, we're also seeing a lot of strains that don't originate from food, but that may originate from the human microbiome.
Mhm.
And that's where, it gets interesting, because these are strains that we couldn't have expected to see, for example, in foods or otherwise, to be consumed. And Akkermansia is an interesting example there, for example, but so are some others. But this, Akkermansia perhaps is a topic in and of itself, but
Hot
yeah,
topic. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, well, one final question kind of on this topic. Do you think that this is more of an industry science level conversation? Do consumers care if their microbes are alive or dead as long as they are getting a health benefit?
Yeah, I think consumers care less about whether their microbes are dead or alive, as long as they can expect specific health benefits. This is what consumers will care about. But also, we do have a category of health conscious consumers that have specific sensitivities or health issues that may want to understand this, and that will want to know why, for example, a postbiotic may be more appropriate for them as opposed to a probiotic. So, definitely there is room to raise consumer awareness. But in the end, the consumer will care about what this product will do for their health.
Absolutely. So maybe moving more into transparency and claims. Definitions still being debated. There's certainly room for interpretations on how postbiotics are marketed, labeled, which certainly can lead to confusions for both consumers as well as brands. But where do you see maybe the biggest gap in transparency currently when it comes to labels, health claims, etc.?
Well, I would say that the biggest gap comes from this question that we briefly touched upon, which is, should purified metabolites, be marketed and defined as postbiotics? Because we do have several products on the market that are primarily purified metabolites that are being marketed as postbiotics. And this is because, for one, postbiotic, it's an interesting term in terms of marketing, so brands are wanting to use it. And also because some in the industry don't agree with the current ISAP definition, and they're going by postbiotics, including these metabolites. So this is really, this is a transparency question. And then, aside from that, some products even may market postbiotics sort of as probiotics, and then describe that it's a heat-treated probiotic, for example, which may also be a bit confusing. So there is a bit of a lack of transparency there. And what can happen if the postbiotic umbrella, isn't well defined, is that a brand may make claims that refer to the whole category of postbiotics without having the scientific clinical evidence to back up their specific product. I don't think this is common. I think there are a lot of brands who are doing their marketing with integrity, but also there's confusion around what postbiotics are in these products. And, I was looking at the various products that are on the market right now, and I have a long list here of different things. And just looking at, the different products that exist. So we have everything from pasteurized microbes to things like metabolites to, let me just go here and pull out my list for a second so that I can give some more examples. Okay, then we have fermented yeast, right? Which has been on the market for a while. We have heat-treated human fecal microbiome-derived postbiotics as well. And then we have, the question of whether things like GABA derived from certain strains and marketed as a gut-brain postbiotic, what these products contain. This is also a bit unclear when you look at some labels. And for example, if you were to see this label that says, and I'm confused, I'm not sure what this contains. So for example, if you were to see GABA derived from a certain lactobacillus strain. So do we know if this product contains parts of the microbe, the whole microbe? It's really not specified. And then we have things like S-Equal, which is not typically marketed as a postbiotic, but some do consider it to be one. Right. So these are some examples of products that are marketed as postbiotics right now.
I'm curious, out of your list, and this is kind of going back to what I referred to at the start, we have a postbiotic user consumer report on the behavior of consumers that use postbiotics. And they tend to gravitate towards label characteristics that also claim combinations with pre and probiotics. Is that a big focus of your list, or are you looking more at single isolated?
I was looking at that as well, yes. And a lot of the products are doing exactly that. So they are including postbiotics as part of a formulation, usually with prebiotics and probiotics. That's what I've seen. And I think this is a way to sort of introduce a new trendy ingredient into a formulation that already has established ingredients, like most consumers are aware of probiotics and prebiotics. So then I think it's a way to make the product more appealing and introduce a new category, but not risk, marketing a product that contains only an ingredient that most consumers are not aware of. That's sort of how I'm seeing it. But then again, we're going back to the question of whether postbiotics, what the consumer cares about, and whether postbiotics, will be used more alongside probiotics and prebiotics, or whether in some cases, there's rationale to use them as a standalone. And from what we're seeing right now, at least from what I'm seeing, and I don't know if you agree, it's more that they're used as part of blends with different biotics.
Yeah, that's definitely what we've been seeing as well, as a theme. And also from, again, going back to our consumer research, the importance of gut health. I think we both understand that there's a greater awareness, a greater understanding from consumers that the gut health is important. They know what the microbiome is. And what we were seeing in our consumer research was most consumers that are already using postbiotics are not just using it for digestion. We're seeing immune health, skin health, general microbiome support. So definitely seeing that the category is evolving quickly. Do you see in the research any applications, health benefits that are a little bit more promising right now?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I think gut health will remain foundational and it's not going to go away. It's just a question of how brands are going to approach specific gut health benefits. And with postbiotics, gut lining support is a big one, but we can expect different applications and more specific things within the gut health category. But what I'm seeing as well, and it's really interesting, is stress, mood, and sleep support. So I think that's another promising category for postbiotics. And there is some research there. There are already some products, again, that are addressing this. And I'm also seeing an overlap of this stress, sleep support potential of postbiotics with women's health and products that might be formulated for sort of either hormonal support or menopause support that also address these aspects of brain health. And then I think immunity will also continue to be there. But yeah, I'm curious about your your industry perspectives as well. I'm personally not seeing it as to be as emerging perhaps as these previous two, but I may be wrong. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we are seeing in terms of what would actually drive somebody to start using postbiotics,
Okay.
two things stood out for the most part, and that would be recommendation from a healthcare practitioner.
Yeah. Okay.
And the second would be wanting or more of a demand for scientific research to prove the benefits.
Okay.
So we are again seeing awareness. The customers are curious, but they definitely want the science to back it up. So I guess turning back to you, what or how important is the healthcare practitioner influence in shaping adoption of these products? Do you see the practitioner community really embracing postbiotics more actively?
I think that it is absolutely important. Like you say, for most of these biotic categories, that's what's mainly driving, right? Consumer use and making consumers more trust, I guess, or want to try the product more. So I think that also speaks to needing to educate practitioners about postbiotics, because many practitioners may only be vaguely aware of postbiotics, and I don't think a lot of practitioners are widely recommending them, simply because they may not have they may not know enough about them, and they may not know enough about specific postbiotics that may be beneficial. I think some are definitely recommending them for specific cases. I think that being influenced by the industry, that some practitioners also consider postbiotics to include microbial metabolites. That's what I've heard personally from several practitioners. Sorry, you had a second question around this. Now I forgot what you mentioned. I was going to tag
Uh,
along. Yeah.
More asking from your perspective, are you
Yes.
seeing healthcare practitioners
Mhm.
embracing postbiotics, utilizing them more, seeking them out, maybe the combination formulas that we're.
Yeah. So I think they are gradually doing this, but that it's that there's a lot of room still there for raising awareness, for education, for knowing about specific products and how they can be, recommended to patients. And that's where the clinical research piece comes in as well, what you mentioned. So, of course, consumers will look for clinical research, but healthcare practitioners will absolutely consider it a must if they're going to recommend a product, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess kind of moving into the end of our discussion, um, if you had to, or maybe if you were advising a brand, kind of sticking to what we were just talking about, they were looking to build trust with both professionals as well as the public, what would you advise them to kind of focus on?
Right. Well, I would advise them first to have solid quality data, of course, on their product. So to have the clinical research there, to have the safety data there, and to have the information around how they're going to approach labels and ingredients when presenting the product on the market, and then to strategically consider their scientific communications, their science communications, how they're going to explain. They may have really a lot of brands may have great science, but they may make it too complex or hard to understand. So I think it's important to have a foundation in the science and not overclaim or hype, but still, explain the benefits in a clear way that's substantiated by the clinical evidence. So really focus on, quality clinical evidence, product characteristics, and clear strategic communications. And have in mind, especially when we're talking about B2C or addressing the consumer, really know who your consumer is and how to talk to them.
Yep.
Yeah,
Speaking their language. I
yeah,
agree.
yeah.
Is there anything that you wish the industry broadly understood better about postbiotics? We were kind of hitting on a lot of big points just now, but as like maybe a takeaway.
I think that the industry should be aware that postbiotics really do have promise right now. They're really emerging as a big category. There's a lot of potential there, but each person really needs to approach it with integrity and with understanding of what makes up this category. So we can all be speaking the same language and using the same terminology and contributing to products that are going to be developed and designed so that they can withstand the industry, have standardization procedures and clinical evidence that is going to make them strong, and not risk becoming generalized category of dead cellular biomass. So really recognizing the potential and finding ways to go forward and establish it as a category, perhaps coming to where probiotics are now within a shorter time frame if this is done right.
Absolutely. And finally, for anybody that wants to follow your work, learn more about your perspectives in the space, where can they find you? Where can they follow you?
So primarily LinkedIn. I have an active LinkedIn. You can find me as Anna Aleksic, MS Farm, on LinkedIn. I also have a website that's in development, so hopefully it will be more active soon. It's annaleksic.com. And I really hope to be. I posted a bit about postbiotics earlier. I did some industry polls that people may be interested in, and I'll definitely be creating more postbiotic content, discussing some of what we went over today and going into perhaps more detail about certain specifics. So that's where you can find me, and I'm always happy to connect with others in the industry and I just enjoy starting these conversations, having discussions. My previous posts about postbiotics, they really engaged people. I had over 100 comments. People were sharing, what they think about postbiotics, where the confusion is, where the clarity is, and so on. So I think it's important, especially for a category that's evolving like postbiotics, to have these open discussions and to engage in critical thinking so that we can help shape it together.
Absolutely. Well, and thank you again for joining me on this conversation and for diving into the complexity, the nuance of postbiotics, the definition, their applications. I think we covered a lot of good ground today, and I'm happy that we could feature your expertise.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I really enjoyed our conversation as well, and I hope there will be more to come.
Likewise.